Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
um, I don't know about that, but I guess for myself,
Welcome to the Comedians in Elevators podcast. I've got my guest, Kent Altman. Kent, say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
hi everybody, I'm Kent. I grew up in Florida and moved to LA to chase the Hollywood dream, and I've worked on a bunch of TV shows and podcasts, and I produced 4 feature films back in the day, and then moved to Louisiana during the pandemic, and so I'm here doing that.
Very cool.
Trying
Hey,
to get back.
right? Okay, so now Hollywood's got to chase you and bring you back in, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, things are changing. We're all creating. So that's the whole point of the podcast, right? So let's get
Yeah,
into it. Are you ready?
yeah, for sure.
Listen, to my regular listeners, I know you don't like when at the beginning of these conversations I ask you to subscribe. None of us like it. I don't like saying it. I don't like it being in here. But it's frustrating. You know what else is frustrating? It's also frustrating when I look in the back end of the YouTube channel and I see the 56% of you that watch frequently haven't yet subscribed. And I know this because I see it in the comments section. You say things like, I didn't know I didn't subscribe. And that's actually what fuels the show. Basically, it's like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask all the time, because it enables us to build and build and build. And we're going for the long term here. Hit the subscribe button and we'll continue to build this show for you. That's my promise. Thank you to all you guys that do subscribe. It means the world to me. All right, so the whole point of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus the comedian. So I define the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So Kent, would you agree that you start as a comic and evolve into a comedian?
Yeah, it sounds like that would be what makes sense. I think that obviously being a comedian takes a lot of like practice and skill that you have to develop, and like going to improv classes and doing your thing over and over again. Whereas, there are plenty of examples out there of like somebody thinking that somebody's funny and somebody saying, "Hey, you're funny, tell a joke." And then they're like on the spot and they can't do it because, they don't have that practice. They don't have that muscle that they've trained. And yeah, I definitely think a comedian is an evolution.
So that to me, that's a perfect example, right? They're a funny person, but they don't have any jokes. So they're a comedian that isn't funny, right? They have to
Yeah,
go become a comic and then evolve back into that true comedian. Would you agree
yeah,
with that?
I would.
That's
Yeah.
how we see it. All right. So the first question, the role of persona in comedy. So how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus their real self?
I think it depends on the comedian, right? Like some people spend their entire lives developing that character and play that character in person, and then you meet them in real life, and they're so different, or they're mostly different. Like I worked at a performing arts center for a while, and we had some big name comedians come through, and some of them were exactly like you would expect them to be, and others were completely like quiet wallflowers.
Mhm.
So I think that it just depends on who the person is. Are they introverted or extroverted?
That's something we're going to get into. So does authenticity matter or is the illusion part of the magic?
I think that the illusion is authentic if you're doing it right anyway. So yeah, authenticity is what it's all about. People can smell a fake from far away, and then that person isn't funny. But if you are authentically playing the character, that's just as good as authentically being yourself.
That's a very powerful statement. A lot of people would disagree. I agree with you, but I see it in a very almost technical way when you make that statement. Is there another way that you could describe it for some people that don't quite understand what you're saying?
Well, like if you think about it in terms of like a movie that you've seen, those people are not playing themselves. You know, they are playing characters that have been written. Even when they're improving in a scene, like happens occasionally in some movies, they are operating within the parameters of what that script calls for and what that character calls for and how those relationships interact with each other. And so if they are true to that, they're being authentic to that, then they're still technically lying to you because that's not who they are and that's not authentic, but they are authentically playing the part that they've been asked to play, right?
So it's like a parallel reality, basically.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
they're inviting you to, hey, my parallel reality is the real reality. You're in the false reality, the false matrix. So come on over, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So punching up versus punching down. Where do comics versus comedians stand on this? So let me put it in some historical context. Did a jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
um, I don't know about that, but I guess for myself, it's the difference between having fun and making fun. Like you can laugh at someone if you're punching down, but you're laughing at them. You're not laughing with them, right? And so if you're
Mhm.
punching up, then that has a couple of different connotations, right? In the context of like punching up, you're punching up against a weight class that you're out of. You're punching up against somebody who has more power than you and maybe deserves to be knocked down a peg or two. But there's also that like I'm a screenwriter and there's that old phrase punching up the dialogue. You know, it's about making it
Okay.
punchier, about making it more succinct, about making the jokes jokier, you know, louder, faster, funnier, and all that stuff. So I think it depends on the aim. And I think that it depends on the individual person because there are a lot of people who are insecure and like to laugh at other people because of their own insecurities, because it makes them uncomfortable. Whereas there are a lot of people who are worthy of being laughed at because of their ridiculousness. And so if you punch up at that, it's
So
different.
are you saying that the punching up term in screenwriting came before the comedic punching down use today?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. But was
I
that
have
your
no idea.
personal experience that you experienced the word, the concept in screenwriting before you experienced it in jokes like Dave Chappelle when he does comedy?
I started learning screenwriting when I was like 13 or 14 years old, and that was before I was really aware of comedy. And
Okay.
so for me personally, yes.
All right.
But whether or not the term belongs to one over the other, I don't know the history of that.
Well, I mean, it sounds like, that age you were, this is before the punching down phenomenon that occurred within the last 10 years, right? So you're talking about before that, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was the
So,
90s. 80.
okay, so
Wait, what? When was I born? I don't know.
exactly. Hey, I get it too. Listen, we're all merging into one generation somehow. I don't know how that happened,
Yep.
but we're going to Mars. All right, very cool. So there's a lot to uh I want to dwell on that, but I don't. So we'll keep going. If you can pull in a punch up from that, bring it on. So is the
Sure.
audience agreement with a comedian a form of permission or alignment?
Ooh, I almost want to say that you have to have permission to become aligned.
Hmm.
And so, like,
Hmm.
there are a lot of people. So I came up in theater, right? And I performed on stage a whole bunch. And there are certain nights that you could just count on the audience, like,
Yeah.
entertain me, you know, and
Yeah.
that kind of
Oh yeah.
audience takes a lot. And yeah,
Yeah.
you know, and like, so you've got to have an audience that's willing to go there. And then
Yeah.
I think it just, it gets more and more there. Like you can just climb that hill together if they're willing to go there.
Right. That's a great nuance, which I guess that's you're pretty much figured out the question before I did. So, what do you do in that situation, right? You've got somehow the whole audience is infected by this one grumpy dude right? The mind virus of his attitude, he doesn't want to be there, is just infected everybody. So you got to close him on permission for alignment. How do you do it?
Yeah. Um, in my personal experience on stage, I would say that most of the time people just give up at a certain point and just get through it and just keep going, get the show over and go to the bar after,
Okay.
but I
We have a
think that
better
it's
option.
probably best. Yeah. I think that maybe you gotta kind of break the fourth wall a little bit, especially if you're a comedian. You have
Yeah, that's
permission already to break the fourth wall.
right.
And
But
so like
let's
it,
stick with this
yeah,
because you experienced this in a dramatic theatrical don't break the fourth wall scenario, right? But you
yeah,
are suggesting that you might need to in this situation, right?
yeah.
What would you do?
Look at the
Okay.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of a situation in which I've actually experienced it,
Right.
but nothing's coming to mind. I guess maybe it depends on the role that you're playing. If you're in a play or a musical or something, and you're just a supporting person or ensemble member, you don't really have much power in that situation. But if
Right.
you're playing the lead, depending on the kind of show, you might be able to just look at them and say something like, "Am I not entertaining you?" Or, "Are you here with the rest of us? Put your phone away." Like you, you have a certain ability, maybe, but it depends on a lot, I think. And
Yeah,
depends on,
for
too,
sure.
if you can feel the rest of the audience there with you, then maybe that is a moment where you can punch down, right, from your position of power into the audience and say, "This should be fun for all of us, and you're ruining it, sir. You need to wake up."
You know what? I mean, honestly, that is the best punching down I've ever heard.
Oh,
Like that's the best use case for punching down. It's a pejorative. Punching down is considered negative. But in
yeah.
this case, you actually turned it around. You found a use case for this. So this is interesting. We got to create a product which is just your performance gets better. So on to the next one. I mean, that was awesome. So what? So let's put it in another context. So cultural translation of comedy. So how do jokes that work in one country bomb in another?
A lot of times I think that it's probably around euphemisms. Um, Obviously, cultural habits are a thing. There are certain words. I've been on Duolingo learning Chinese, and there are certain words in Chinese that sound like
Oh
people's
yeah,
names here. And so
yeah.
there are silly things about that where like you say somebody's name and you're really calling them a dry apple or something. And so a Chinese person might laugh at that, but an English speaking person is going to be like, "Why are you laughing? It's just my name." So yeah, I definitely think cultural context makes something funny. It's also a
That
difference between like your microculture too, because if you are like a southerner and you're a southern comedian, you're in an audience in front of southern people, you have a little bit of wiggle room to make fun of people that you know really well because you grew up with them. Whereas like if you're a southern person in New Jersey, you might not have that same context.
mm, I agree with that. And touching back on the Chinese English dichotomy, I could totally see how training AI based on this user data might be something that could make you think that AI is conscious when it starts telling really good jokes. So,
Yes.
so are comics more universal while comedians are more culturally specific?
I would probably suggest the opposite. I think that it's
Okay.
easier to be a comic because you can be around your friends and your family and people who know you and say something funny in a moment. But again, that's not a muscle. I mean, it might be a muscle, but it's not training for being a comedian, whereas I think
Mhm.
that a comedian can walk into the room and spot the context and live in it if they are good enough to figure out what it is and adjust, because sometimes you get up on stage and your jokes start going well and sometimes they don't. And so can you make that adjustment?
Well, that brings to the next one, which is crowd work versus crafted work. So, if comics riff like in crowd work, which I would argue, and also riff like influencers, say on TikTok, um, also in the comments section, and
Yeah.
comedians perform like in reaction videos, where is the sweet spot?
I love a performance. So I think the sweet spot is always going to be on something that's rehearsed and understood before you walk in and still has room to wiggle and grow. But, um, because that's the thing about theater, right? You are going in and you're doing this show for some lengthy period of time, and it's the same script every night, but every audience is going to find it different.
Mm-hmm.
My directing mentor said theater is what happens in the air between the audience and the play, right? If you don't have the audience, you're just rehearsing. And it takes that added element of someone there to experience the story that you're telling to make it theater. And so I would argue that comedy is a different level of theatrical experience, right? And so for me, the rehearsal process gives them a lot more knowledge and room to like make something of it. Whereas a comic is maybe funny, and a lot of
Yeah.
times too, it can feel like a punch down from a comic, no matter what they're
Right.
doing. Somebody's going to get offended in that comment section.
So, I've done both a stage play and stand-up comedy. And stand-up comedy, you don't really feel the fourth wall, but when
Yeah,
you do a theatrical performance, you almost feel the wall's
Beady,
presence,
beady, beady, beady.
I would argue. So,
yeah.
would you agree that that perhaps is an entirely other dimension that neither the performer nor the audience exists in, but both are perceiving?
That's really interesting. I haven't thought about that before. Um, yeah, it's kind of like knowing that there's an energy barrier or something between you. I would also maybe think that it gets complicated when you're doing something Brechtian,
Hmm.
because the
Yeah.
entire idea of Brechtian theater is breaking that fourth wall. And so, yeah, it's like there's like electricity in the room, and do you lean into it, or do you ignore it? Do you use it to help you, or do you just do your thing without thinking about it? It's interesting.
I mean, basically, I have never seen well, I've never seen a kind of breaking of the wall. I've only seen it there or not there. I've never
Sure.
seen anyone actually break the wall. So I think that would be perhaps an interesting, maybe that's exactly what stand-up comedians should do is put a wall up and then smash it down.
Smash it down.
I'm gonna work on that one. Whatever the hell that is, I'm gonna think about that one. Oh, so what happens when a comic leans too much into crowd work or when a comedian gets heckled?
I think that some gold can happen when heckling starts. Um, if they are not too precious about themselves, and if they're willing to use that moment to improv. I also think it's funny sometimes when a comedian heckles the audience.
Hmm.
Um,
I mean, is it always heckling? I mean, if you're doing crowd work, right?
yeah, a
What are you
little bit.
imagining when
Yeah.
you, but you're thinking something even more, right?
I guess I'm thinking about there's a couple of comedians that I sometimes see pop up on Instagram feed that really they do crowd work, but then they'll get someone who they're not necessarily expecting to be disruptive to their show or
Mm,
to their train of thought or something, and it becomes this whole other thing, right?
yeah.
Where they're like, now the whole show is about you, heckler.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when you degrade and degenerate into rage. And so now you
Yeah,
have to climb back up. All
yeah.
right. So very important question. Advertising and self-promotion. Who advertises themselves more? The comic, the comedian, or the magician?
You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast to get the message out today. See you soon.
Ooh. I don't know. I've been seeing a lot of ads for the Magic Castle lately.
Well, it kind of got burned down. Something happened.
Did it?
Oh yeah,
I
there
didn't
was a
know that.
fire. Maybe they remodeled it. Yeah, there was a fire. I mean, I think there have been multiple. It's very haunted. So
Yeah, I went there when I first moved to LA in 2014, and it was a really cool experience. But they weren't advertising anything.
Oh,
I didn't
they
even know
don't
it
need to.
existed. Yeah. But I see
That's
that
probably why
all
they're
over
advertising.
now.
That's probably
Yeah.
why, because it got severely damaged, so they shut down for a while, and so everyone's like, "Well, no, we're back. We didn't die forever. It's a magic trick." So is self-promotion seen as selling out, or is it necessary for survival? What a stupid question.
I think in this era of time, it's necessary for survival. I think that you have to be. This is kind of my argument with independent filmmaking. There's a lot of chatter right now because the industry is going through so many changes about greenlighting yourself and networking with people and growing your professional sort of footprint in the world. And I think that that's all really correct, but I also think that there's something to be said about like not pigeonholing down into only artists caring about what you're doing. There was this theater that I worked at in Orlando that had a really good reputation for putting on really, really great shows, but a very small audience. And most of the choices that the people running it were making were geared toward bringing in actors as the audience. And while I was working there, I was like, actors can't afford to be this audience, right? They don't have that kind of income. And so you need to reach people who have the disposable income to be able to like survive as an artist and as a group. And so I think that it's really important that you're networking with your audience and building out your audience and building out the audience in general, because a lot of people right now are stuck on their phones and they think that they don't have an attention span to pay attention to this kind of stuff anymore because every video on TikTok is 60 seconds. But my argument there is like, you get into bed at night and you bring up your phone and you say, I'm just going to watch 3 videos and then I'm going to go to sleep. And then the sun comes up. So you clearly do have the attention span to pay attention to something for hours at a time. It's just about those dopamine hits that TikTok is giving you, you know? I've gone off on a little soapbox there.
No, that's really good. So I have 2 things to say about that, if I may. One of them is I think that there's something going on with perception of half the population based on the MBTI in the last, which is you're either a perceiver or a judger, right? If you're a perceiver, you actually speak before thinking. And if you're a judger, you think before speaking. And so if you're a perceiver, I think TikTok has hacked your brain because it's giving you something to perceive before you think, but you're not going to have an original thought because it just hijacked your perception. And that's what's happening with every single perceiver in the universe. And I had another point, but I forgot it. So
I buy that.
I mean, that's been my observation, right? It's at the smallest unit of measure, but I digress. For everyone that's MBTI related, which is my focus on this, but we'll move on to the next one. So, censorship and offense. Does a comic avoid offense while a comedian courts it to prove a point, like a magician?
Yes. Yes. And I think that they have to, right? I think that there are some topics that really just are never going to be funny, you know, and it largely is a very small list of things that I think will never, ever, ever be funny. But even in those situations, I think a comedian has permission to try, right? Whereas like a comic is trying to not offend anybody around them. But I think that being offended in an audience capacity makes you ask the question, why am I offended by this? If you are a smart thinking person, right? Like, then that's part of the comedian's job. The comedian's job is to open your mind and ask you why you believe the things that you believe and why you behave the way that you behave, which is why they point out things that are like, that's why people who work the room get away with pointing out, the asinine things that people in the room do, but everybody laughs at it, right? Because they know, okay, that I shouldn't have done that, and it's an examination of culture and behavior. Whereas a comic really is just trying to not make waves in the room. They're just trying to be funny and get a little bit of a dopamine hit themselves for everybody laughing at them.
I think that's the very, very insightful. I definitely experienced that personally, right? Sometimes you're trying new material and you just don't know how it's going to be received. And so you're not scared, but you're like trying not to offend because you want to get a baseline. And then once you get a baseline, you can start trying to offend with the same joke so you can become the comedian just for one joke.
Yeah,
So would you agree with that kind of
yeah,
trajectory?
for sure. Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
very cool. So, who survives better in the cancel culture environment, the comic, comedian, or magician?
Magicians have magic.
I know
So
it's a
probably
cheat
them.
code. If they're good, I mean, I'm sure you've seen
If
bad
they're
magic,
good,
the
yeah.
fake thumb. You're like, bro,
Yeah,
get no, come on, fake
yeah,
thumb.
yeah. I don't know. I think it might go back to that offensive thing. Like if because a comedian has and a magician too, they have a professional persona and their audience is made up of people they don't know, whereas a comic is performing to some level in front of people they do know. And so if they offend everyone they do know, then get canceled by everyone they know, then that's really hard to walk back. Whereas a comedian, there are 8 billion people on the planet. If this audience doesn't like you, you can go find another one.
So
I
what's
mean, it's
happening?
not
So
that easy, but
well, what's happening with the comic where their audience is limited? Are they not online, or is that they just know everybody they're telling jokes to?
I think they're more likely to know more of the people that they're telling jokes to.
Okay,
Yeah.
smaller circle. All right. So
Yeah.
that's consistent with the evolution for sure.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So timing and delivery, science or art? Do comics rely more on structure and comedians more on rhythm and emotion?
Mm. I don't know, but P's and K's are funny. So I think that there's something to structure. I think that there's definitely something to understanding what people laugh at and why, and being able to repeat it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean that's I think you just went like layers deep. So I'm trying to call it like climb the rope back up. So yeah, no, I agree. I don't know where I just made it back to the top.
Yay.
I made it. I survived. Okay, laughter versus applause. So are comics chasing laughs and comedians chasing applause breaks that validate the message?
I think that a smart performer does not ask for the reaction that they want.
Hmm.
And so if you are asking for the audience to do what you want them to do by applauding or by laughing, then you're working too hard and trying to tell them how to feel is not going to elicit the feeling you want them to have. You just have
Now,
to let go at a certain point.
now, are you referring to drama or comedy?
All of it.
I would agree for comedy for sure. That's part of the blind spot and agenda.
Yeah.
But is there a blind spot? I'll say a blind spot and agenda in drama.
Uh, yes, it's called the emotional bathtub because
Okay.
if you are, especially if you're on stage, it works to a certain extent a little differently in a movie, but if you are feeling everything in the scene for yourself and it's not given away to the audience, then what is the audience supposed to take from it? They're watching you emotionally manipulate yourself, right?
Right.
And sort of get off on your own feelings, which is not fun.
Right.
It's uncomfortable. And so people
So
want to have fun when they're
you need to
watching a
get out of
story.
the emotional bathtub is what you're saying.
Yes,
Okay. So once you get out of there, what do you do?
you open your eyes. A lot of times it comes from closed eyes, right? So like it's something I'm gonna. The first thing that came into my mind was um, the character Rachel Berry on Glee, who closes her eyes for like every single song ever, and she's one of the most hated characters in television history, even though that actress is really talented and I've seen her in other things and she's completely likable and all of that stuff. But it's a choice I think that she made to make the character cut off from the audience because the eyes are the window to the soul, right? And so if the audience can see what's happening behind your eyes, if they can see what's happening in your heart, then they're going to connect to you. And if you close that off, then you don't stand a chance.
So you're saying that that was a solution to not getting out of the emotional bathtub?
Oh, she was so in the emotional bathtub.
Got it. So, but that was the solution that she came up with is just to close her eyes.
Correct.
Oh, very
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, okay. That's a new read. I mean, makes perfect sense for sure. Okay. So, comedy as commentary. When does a comedian cross into being a philosopher or a preacher?
Oh, I think it depends on their subject matter. Because, like,
Yeah.
some people never go deep, they just flit on the surface, but other people make it their whole thing that they're talking about the world. And I think that it's got to be set up, right? Like, it's got to be a 1-2 punch sort of thing. Because you can't just start there. You have to get the audience there with you.
Yeah. A comic can't do this, right? This can't even be
No,
something. So, is this good or does it dilute the humor?
I think it's good. I think that it's good for an audience that wants it, you know?
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, I think that it's some of the most important stuff because, again, it's supposed to make you think, right? It's supposed to make you laugh and have a good time, but you're also supposed to take something away when you go home.
I could see this as the agenda bathtub for comedy, right? Right? It's
Yeah,
not an emotional thing, it's the agenda. My agenda is da 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 da, and you just stick to it. So maybe the secret is to closing your eyes when you preach on stage, and that's how you'll be the most
yeah.
hated comedian for telling us what you think. All right, comedy and vulnerability. I would argue comics hide behind their jokes and comedians expose themselves. If you agree, which one is braver?
I would agree with you, and I think that that makes anybody who's willing to be vulnerable braver.
Excellent. So, on the Comedians and Elevators podcast, we have a tradition where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest. And
Okay.
so, Kent, you're the next guest. And the previous guest was Fatty Dawool. And his question was to you, who he does not know yet, I think. How does the comic become a funny comedian?
Practice and,
Accident?
huh?
Say it again.
I said practice.
Oh, practice.
You gotta hone those muscles and do your do your due diligence, work for it, because it's just like, I mean, it's not just like dancing, but it, you know, or singing, or it's a different set of muscles, it's a different set of skills. And so if you want to go from becoming a comic to a comedian, you really have to hone those skills. 10,000 hours, man.
So I would agree. I mean, we basically covered everything else beyond effort, right? So yeah, it's pretty much it. Okay, so last question, legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comics Type 5 survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
um I think that it's the comedian because, I mean, you can name comics maybe who are active right now or in your life or something, but everybody can look back in time and say Charlie Chaplin was funny, or like, I'm completely blanking on any other names, but like a comedian stands the test of time because of all of the things that we've been talking about, right? It's more practice, it's more skill, it's more dedication to it.
But the funny thing is you were only able to name a comic, and that was not the answer that you gave. So that's a very interesting.
He's a comic? Do you
Well,
think he's a comic?
Charlie Chaplin, arguably, he was performing in the comic arena, even though he was also a comedian, but he was actively doing the comic role.
Right.
That's
But can I ask you a question?
absolutely.
Do you think that someone always both things, or do you think it's like a Pokemon and once you evolve you can't devolve?
I think you can forget intentionally, obviously, like kind of arguably how the universe works, and just do it again and do it again. Reincarnation of the whole cycle of comic into comedian.
Okay.
Well, with that, Kent, where can everybody find you online?
I don't really do social media. I have a Substack if you want to take a look at my Substack. I don't even
want us to
have anything.
That's fine. It sounds like
I write about the industry, the entertainment industry, and sort of will be putting out a series of articles about like where I think it's going and what is happening in terms of like the change that we're seeing.
Fair enough. Well, Ken, thank you so much for being my guest. And for everybody watching, please like and subscribe. And we will see you in the next one.
Thanks.